Hey there, friend. One of the most profound leadership insights I have come to embrace is this. Human beings do not make decisions rationally. However, they do make them predictably. The legendary psychology duo Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky spent decades studying the ways our judgment gets distorted by predictable mental shortcuts. And these are things like confirmation bias and overconfidence and anchoring, loss aversion, and hindsight bias. And many of these, if not all of them, you are probably familiar with on some level. And in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through those 5 basic biases using a simple framework I use in my University of Oklahoma leadership class that I call the 3-6-5 checklist. I'll give you a quick everyday example of each bias and then how it shows up on the construction site and in decision-making. And my friend, if you would like to own this leadership tool yourself, you can download the checklist that I use from class in the show notes. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast, where we help construction executives lead high-performing teams that finish on time and under budget without all the firefighting and babysitting, so you can lead with focus and control. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. Now, Michael Lewis, the author of The Blind Side and The Big Short, and my favorite business book of all time, Moneyball, because I think it talks about undervaluing people and ideas so much. Well, Michael Lewis also wrote a book that kind of flew under the radar, but I think is absolutely wonderful. It is called The Undoing Project, and it's a story about this unlikely pair of psychologists that are both smart and funny and different in their own way about Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. You might be familiar with Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He's the same guy. And their work on biases and a word they came up with called heuristics, these are just mental shortcuts, showed that humans consistently make the same judgment mistakes over and over again. And here's the brutal thing we need to accept about ourselves and those we seek to lead. Awareness of and full understanding over these biases and heuristics, these mental shortcuts, does not in any way, shape, or form make you immune to making these very same mistakes. So what do? Well, I think this falls into the territory that we don't necessarily need more teaching, we need more reminding. So I go back to my mentor from afar, Charlie Munger, and Charlie Munger 101 says, don't overthink it. Make a checklist and use it when you come upon these circumstances. So that's what I did. And the result is called this 3-6-5 leadership checklist. The 3 in the 3-6-5 leadership checklist comes from Seth Godin in one of his daily newsletters that he's been writing for 20-some years. He wrote that human beings make decisions for one of 3 reasons: convenience, status, and belonging. People make decisions if something's easy, it's convenient, it gives them some sort of status, it gives them some sort of increased standing in the hierarchy, or belonging or affiliation. They feel like they're part of a team. Now, the 6 stands for the 6 persuasion principles outlined by Dr. Robert Cialdini. I did an entire episode on these. This is a wonderful book to own. It's called Influence. See episode 491. I break down each one of these in detail. And the 5 stands for the 5 cognitive biases that we are going to cover here today. And the first one is confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is our tendency to look for evidence that proves we're right and nudges us to ignore evidence that might prove we're wrong. We don't evaluate information objectively. We filter it through what we already believe, what we want to continue to believe in the future. I recently had this conversation with a friend of mine who wanted to begin a diet that certainly could be called a fad. I did not use that language, but they were very excited. So what did they do? They went online and they started Googling it. They dumped it into AI. They started to notice every single success story. And they ignored all the people who tried it and failed. And what they were doing is they were hunting for confirming evidence to get this huge pile that would support their decision to start the diet. I naturally had zero desire to get in front of this confirmation bias freight train. So I said, all right, good luck. See how it goes. I hope it works out for you. More specific to our job site, say you got a project manager or a superintendent, and they believe a certain supplier is unreliable. So when that supplier has a small delay or a minor hiccup, what do? They raise their hands and they say, see, it's exactly what I'm talking about. It confirms the belief they already had. However, when the supplier delivers early or they perform well or they go above and beyond, those moments are dismissed or ignored. And this could be either conscious or subconsciously. So good leaders actively seek disconfirming information. They ask, what evidence would I have to see to prove me wrong here? Because if you can't answer that, then you are actively not looking for anything that might indicate that you're thinking about this incorrectly. The second bias is overconfidence. And the overconfidence bias is our human tendency to overestimate our knowledge, accuracy, and predictions. And humans are consistently more confident than we are correct. A leader on the supply side and a friend of mine who's been on the show, Carl Moyer, will often say, when it comes to people indicating how good of a driver they are and how strong their sense of humor is, they will always say they're above average. 90% of people will tell you they're above average drivers. And from a statistical standpoint, that's not right. And when it comes to sense of humor, I know this myself, right? We will overwhelmingly think that we are not below average in anything. So a construction example might be a contractor confidently saying, yeah, we'll have this done in 6 weeks. I'm like 95% sure. But the estimate doesn't account for weather, material delays, inspections, change orders, war in the Middle East, whatever. But that confidence isn't malicious and it isn't stupid. It's just human nature. We're not accounting for a margin of error. And this is exactly why good leaders build in buffers and contingency plans. Confidence should never replace probability, and human beings are not good probabilistic thinkers. And this is exactly why we built the Better Decisions app. It's a free tool. We use it in our University of Oklahoma leadership program. I use it personally when we are coaching executives to make better decisions as they recognize, navigate around, and learn from their own biases as it relates to overconfidence. You can go to your app store, download it now, and use it for free. The third bias is called anchoring. And anchoring occurs when the first number we hear becomes the reference point, even if it's arbitrary. And everything after that gets judged relative to that anchor number. And this comes up in everyday life all the time. A store that you're visiting shows some sort of signage that says regular price is $200, but today it's only $120. Now, you and I will, from a cognitive standpoint, understand that that item was probably never actually $200. We're probably thinking, oh, they just made up that number to provide more contrast to the quote-unquote savings that we're getting today. We think that, but the first number, that $200, sets the perception of value. In construction, this shows up in negotiation. If a subcontractor opens up with something like this, we're expecting this to be $140,000 for the scope of work. That number, $140,000, becomes the anchor, even if we know the fair price is actually much closer to $100,000. So now the negotiation becomes $140,000 to $135,000 to $130,000 to $120,000, right? And we might end up somewhere closer to $110,000. Why? Well, we're not starting at $100,000. We're starting at $140,000. This happens in negotiation intentionally and inadvertently. So what's the takeaway? Well, whoever sets the first number often, but not always, controls the negotiation. And good negotiators are always very intentional about anchors, understanding what they are, and making sure as a team, we are not allowing ourselves to drift only as far as that anchor will allow us to go. The next bias is called loss aversion. And loss aversion means losses feel roughly twice as painful as the gains feel good. And I know that's kind of a hard sentence to choke down here. But the point is that people will work harder to avoid losing $100 than they will to gain $100. And this happens every single day with human beings and their stock portfolio. So a person refuses to sell a stock that has dropped in value. They keep holding onto it, hoping it will come back. They refuse to lock in the loss. Why? Because it's painful. And say that certain stock has lost, $1,000. And that's very painful, and they don't want to lock that loss in. Say they've got another stock that has increased $1,000. That doesn't offset. The pain of the $1,000 loss is not offset by the $1,000 in happiness. They might need $1,500 in happiness or $2,000 worth of happiness. What they're saying is they're not equal. The pain looms larger than the happiness. On the construction site, we have a contractor who continues pursuing a bad project. The margins are shrinking, the problems keep piling up, but leadership, we keep pushing forward because we've already invested the time and money. We don't want to lose what we've already spent. And this is often described as the sunk cost fallacy. It's already gone. You've already spent it. And this is why folks in sales and business development know that addressing someone's needs, fears, or pains is more likely to result in an immediate discussion than pursuing an opportunity. Why? Well, pains loom larger. So if you can address an immediate need, fear, or pain and solve that, they are going to make that investment much faster than the possibility of taking something that might just be doing okay and make it great. So the opportunity for growth will almost always take a backseat to immediate needs, fears, or pains. I recently read for the first time the classic book by Jim Bouton called Ball 4, and he was describing the Seattle Pilots. When they were an expansion team, they had to go buy players from other teams, naturally, to build their roster. So they paid $175,000 for a certain player, and he was no good. They weren't really playing him, so the player comes in and says, "Hey, can I get a trade?" And they say, "No, we can't trade you." He says, "Why not?" And he goes, "Well, we paid $175,000 for you to come over from the Cincinnati Reds, and we'll never get that in a return given how badly you're playing. But we can play you more and hope that you'll play better." So they keep playing him, and he continues to be bad, and they continue to lose, and they end up losing like 11 games in a row. And the whole idea is you paid $175,000 regardless. That ain't coming back. Playing a player who's not good and continuing to lose games is a stupid reason, hoping at someday you'll recover the money. It's gone. Make the decision now. Build the roster, given what you know today. And the last one that you probably are most familiar with is hindsight bias. And the hindsight bias is the belief that after something happens, we think we knew it all along. We rewrite that history in our minds. I'm guilty of this all the time, being a sports fan. A game is played, somebody loses, and I say, "Yeah, I knew it. I knew they didn't have a chance." Even though I didn't know that, and I didn't say that beforehand. Now, maybe I suspected it, but that is completely different. And again, this goes back to why it's so important to document our predictions and our confidence intervals. You have probably heard this in the past on our job site when a project goes poorly, and afterward the team says, everybody around, we all knew that schedule was unrealistic. But no one really voiced that until the end when things really started to slide. So great leaders document decisions and assumptions before outcomes happen. Again, go download. It is free. There's no reason not to. Go get the Better Decisions app. This solves that. It keeps hindsight from distorting reality. The tool my team and I use all the time is something called the pre-mortem. A post-mortem, someone dies and we say, all right, what the hell happened here? Why'd they die? And we look in the rearview mirror and try to figure out what went wrong. Well, a pre-mortem goes into the future and presupposes that things have gone wildly poorly. We lost money, we lost time, people are unhappy, people quit the team. It is the worst case scenario and we are dead. And then we say, okay, what were the most likely causes of failure? Well, maybe we didn't have enough talent, or maybe we were overburdened, or we were distracted, or we had too small of a budget, or we had trouble getting decisions from Sam on the client team, whatever that might be. But the pre-mortem allows you to zoom into the future, understand that bad things have happened, and to reverse engineer how we can avoid the most obvious situations and decisions that would result in something poorly happening. If you're not using that pre-mortem meeting now, you're missing out on a wonderful tool to help you avoid the worst case scenarios. So that's it, my friend. Those are the 5 biases in my 3, 6, 5 checklist. Because leaders, we're not just managing projects, we're managing humans. And humans are tricky. We're managing their judgments and their decision-making, but the judgment is predictable and often poor. The better we understand these predictable errors, the better decisions we will make as a team. So this checklist, again, you can download in our show notes, becomes a simple mental reminder. The 3 motivations driving decision-making from Seth Godin: convenience, status, and belonging. The 6 persuasion principles from the book Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. These are a must to know and understand and apply in a leadership role. Go listen to episode 491 of this Construction Leadership Podcast. And these 5 biases: confirmation bias, overconfidence bias, anchoring, loss aversion, and hindsight bias. These distort people's thinking, our own, and certainly the people around you. And when you start seeing these patterns, you'll notice them everywhere. Factor them in, be reminded that they exist, and you, my friend, will make better decisions. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening. You are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.